Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the True Wellness Podcast with me, Chelsey, your host. If you listened last week, you're probably looking at the title of this episode and scratching your head saying, I thought we were going to talk about spiritual wellness and our kids and our families and all those things. Well, you're not wrong. I was really feeling led to go down a different path for this episode, and it has to do with mindset and growth and our perspective, because that can really change everything for us. And so I'm going to walk you through a list of really important points that I think can totally change your life and your way of thinking, and in turn, change the results that you're getting in your life. So if you look around at our natural world, everything is in this cycle of growing or dying. It also, our seasons are growing or dying, right? Different seasons. But we as humans, I guess you could say, I've heard it said that as soon as we're born, we start to die, right? Because we get closer and closer. Well, I've never really liked that saying because, well, it's just kind of sad to think about it that way. But I've also heard it said in my life that if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think that this is where we as humans have something that the natural world doesn't. First of all, we have a free will and we get to decide the direction of our life in, the small things that we're doing every day, the things we're doing consistently, because that's how we get our results in our life, right? And so I just wanted to start off by encouraging you that you have the power in your hands to truly change your thinking. And just like Craig Rochelle says, that the direction of your life moves towards your strongest thought. And you alone have the power over your thoughts. And, I've said it before that this isn't about manifestation or some woo-woo thing. This is literally about learning to train our brains to have an awareness of the thoughts that are coming into our heads and then what we're doing with those thoughts. And the things that we are looking for, we are going to find. That is just the way that our brains were created, the way that they're wired. And we can use this to our advantage rather than it running the show for our lives. And we're always reacting to, all these thoughts that are going through our brains, right? So the first one I want to leave you with here is perspective has the power to change everything. So I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Vantage Point, but I really liked it. And I think that it gives us a visual representation of this concept of perspective can change everything for you, right? So in this movie, something bad happens, right? Like there is attack at this public place, and the movie goes through what each person is seeing from their perspective. And so you learn a little bit more as you go through, depending on whose perspective that they're showing. And our brains are like this too. If you've ever worked in a place where you had to go through training of what happens if somebody robs you and you have to give a description to the police, things to think about, because in those moments we perceive things differently based on our physical perspective, yes, but also based on our brains and how they're responding in that situation. So if you've ever seen different witnesses interviewed on the news and one person is like, oh, it was a super tall guy and he was wearing a blue shirt, and some other person's like, oh, it was a really short guy and he was wearing an orange shirt, and it's like, what? And it all depends on that person's perspective, but also what was going on in their head at that time. So I just wanted to encourage you that your perspective has the power to change everything, and you get to decide what perspective you're coming from, whether it's positive or whether it's negative, whether it's, a realistic viewpoint or, overly optimistic or underly, I don't think that's a word, but just, or like overly pessimistic, right? Like you get to decide the angle you're coming from. And you get to decide, honestly, the way that you spin any given information, because when information comes into our brains, it's just that. And then we interpret that information based on different things we've learned or different ways we're talking to ourselves, stories we're telling ourselves, all of these things. So I could stub my toe and I could say, oh, I'm such an idiot. Like I always do stupid things like that. Or I could say, ouch, that hurt. And then move on, right? Like I didn't associate or attach meaning to something that happened, because I've said this in past episodes that, so many people say like, life is happening to me. Other people will say life is happening for me. I don't like either of those. I like to say life is happening and we get to decide how we respond and react to it. Straight up, right? Like things are happening around us that we can't control all the time. Back in 2020, when the world shut down, like we got to decide how we reacted. And I was just talking to a friend last night, I think it was, or yesterday, and he was saying that the rate of domestic abuse during 2020 and the lockdowns like skyrocketed. And it just goes to show that in moments of stress and things that are out of our control, we try to control the things that we can. Now, some of us will come at it from the positive perspective, the positive angle of how can I grow in this situation? How can I grow? While others are going to look at it as what can I control and how do I not die, right? Like those are two totally different ways to come at the same problem, right? I have a mentor that says all the time that we as people are not necessarily pleasure seeking, but we are pain avoiding through pleasure seeking. We as people don't like pain. We just don't. We want to avoid it at all costs. Some people will numb through whether that's entertainment or drugs or alcohol or even through just people pleasing. And I mean, look at social media, right? It's a place for us to come and get our egos stroked, right? Like, look at me. But I just want to encourage you in the sense that our perspective, we can change it. We really, really can. Is it going to happen overnight if you have an overtly negative perspective? And you're typically someone who does react or respond negatively or look at life through a negative lens. No, it's going to take an awareness, first of all, and then a practice of daily recognizing that, okay, I'm changing out my negative lens and I'm putting it, with a realistic or an optimistic lens, or, somewhere in between, depending on what the goals are you have in your life. I choose to look at life through a growth minded lens. Whereas, a lot of people look through a fixed lens that I can't change the things that are happening around me. But I can change myself. And that's really what I'm talking about, is this idea of growing, being in a constant state of growing rather than dying. So the second one I want to bring to your attention is obstacles are inevitable. Challenges, obstacles, all of it. Things are going to come up that are going to take you off track, that are going to make it harder for you to accomplish your goals. Honestly, in the course of a day, these challenges and obstacles are going to drive you crazy, because I know they drive me crazy, but it's up to us for how we respond. And if instead of looking at these things as obstacles, instead we are expecting them to come, right? Like we just know, like things are going to happen that we can't control, and that's okay. But looking at them as opportunities and challenges to grow, maybe to get curious and figure things out. because an obstacle, you can go around it, you can go under it, you can go through it. Like, you can figure it out. Getting curious and expecting it and planning ahead for, these are the potential obstacles that I'm going to face. And this is what I'm going to do when they come along. And not letting them freak us out when they do come along. Because we were already yeah, they were going to come. We just didn't know when or how, but we're ready for it. And that's just a part of growing. It's inevitable that those obstacles are going to come. The next one is this grow or die picture. Then that there's no standing still. And I don't want this to be confused with lack of rest. That's not what I'm talking about. Growth does not necessarily mean that you're never resting, because resting is actually an active thing, a decision that we're making in order to make sure that we're not growing too quickly and burning out, right? Resting is a conscious effort for us to maximize our output and our results while also maintaining a steady growth rate. That's exactly what it is. It helps us to manage stress. It helps us to grow better and more steadily and more solidly. So my dad always gave me this picture of sitting in a canoe on a river. And he said, just like that is like your spiritual walk with the Lord, is that, you're never just sitting still. You're either going with the flow or you're actively moving forward by rowing. And I wanted to take that a little further, because how about if you're in a pond, right? There's no current in a pond. You can sit still, but it also means that your opportunity for growth is very small, because even if you do row, you're very limited in how far you can go. And in a river, you're going to expand that even more. And in an ocean, you're going to expand that even more, right? But that's your decision again. Like, are you going to stay safe and stay in a place where you can sit still in a sense, but it also comes with really limiting borders? Or are you going to expand those borders, get out of your comfort zone, and move into a place where you do have to actively work to move forward and to grow? And that's totally up to you. Everyone gets to make that choice, right? Okay. And then here's the really cool thing about growth, is that when you grow in one area of your life, it tends to have the all boats rise in the harbor. So when the tide rises, all the boats rise together. And that's what happens when you grow in one area of your life. All the other areas of your life tend to start growing as well. So for me, this, in the last few years, this has been fitness. I was never able to do something consistently that worked with my life. I would go all in and burn out. I've shared this story with you. And it wasn't until I found something consistently that I could do that worked with my life that I was able to really grow in my fitness and my health category. And that impacted all the other categories of my life. It helped me show up better as a mom and a wife. It put me in circles of people that I hadn't otherwise been in. It helped me to grow my business because my confidence had grown as well. Not only in, my confidence in my ability to do things, but it's because I had this new growth mindset of, I can do hard things. Like, I can create results. I think that so many people don't get results, and so they can only keep trying for so long, right? Like, you can only keep trying and starting something new so long before you're just like, man, I haven't created any results. So I always encourage people when I'm coaching them to look for the evidence where you have experienced growth, where you have created results in your life, and go from there, because that helps build your confidence over time and helps all the boats to rise, because that also creates more evidence, and so on and so forth, right? Oh, good, buddy. And then you have the power to shift course at any time. You have the power to change your thinking and your perspective, and the fact that you're not growing, or you're not using that lens of a growth mindset at any time. Honestly, that is completely up to you. It's not up to anyone else. Nobody else decides for you. You decide yourself. And so I wanted to share really the key to growth is mindset, which is the internal, the stories that we're telling ourselves, the lens that we're looking through, plus challenge, which is the external overcoming of obstacles, getting out of our comfort zone. Those two together is what equals growth. You could also put consistency in there and sticking with it, right? But that is really it. It's just changing those stories we're telling ourselves, removing our self limitations, because of course there are external limitations, right? Like we all have the same time. We all have 24 hours in a day. We don't all have the same energy or the same financial resources, but all of those things can be created if we learn how to master our bodies and we give ourselves good fuel and we surround ourselves with other people who are growing. If we are challenging ourselves to bring in another stream of income, whether it's through a creative idea that we're putting out there, adding value that people are willing to pay for, or helping people to get an answer for their pain point and find a solution for an issue that they've been looking to solve, right? Like those things can be created. So really the only limitation is ourself and our thinking and how willing we are to get outside of our comfort zone in order to grow. And then I want to leave you with this thought that all things are figure outable. They truly are. If you are resourceful, you can figure it out. The answer is out there. I don't want to say that the answer is within you because the answers aren't always within us. Sometimes it's through seeking a wise mentor, somebody who can hold a mirror up to us and help us to see the things that we aren't seeing. Sometimes it is through self-reflection of, these are the things I've been doing. This is what I want. Who do I need to become in order to create those results? Is it something that I need to change in my thinking? Is it something I need to change in what I'm doing? Is it something else that I need to change? So self-reflection can be a place of that too. It can also be investing in our own learning and growth. Maybe that's taking a course. Maybe that's reading a book. Maybe it's listening to a podcast like this. It's something practical that we're going out, we're investing our resources into, which are going to help us to increase that return on that investment when we apply the things that we learn, right? Maybe it's getting a coach who doesn't know you at all, who can take a completely non-invested in the personal sense look at your life and really help you to uncover the answers that you've been looking for yourself. That is the power of a coach. A coach is someone who is able to do that. A coach is not a teacher. A teacher is someone who tells you something, instructs you on something, right? A coach is someone who helps you to see and to find the answers and create the answers that you need by helping you to take a hard look at your life and be realistic about where you are. So I would just encourage you through all of this, again, that you have the power to change your perspective and your thinking at any time, and to remind you the hard truth that if you're not growing, you're dying. And asking yourself the question, do I want to grow or do I want to die? It's a very hard question, right? But at the end of the day, is it really that hard to answer? It comes down to, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to make the answer to that question a reality, right? Or lack of sacrifice. And honestly, just going with the flow. And, if that's the way you want your life, okay, that's not me. I want to keep growing and getting better every year. so that I can show up bigger and better for other people and serve them in a greater capacity. Until next week, my friend, take care.